Hello everybody, I'm Pontius, and welcome back to Unexpected Awesome. The fantasy genre has a large variety of subsets inside of it. Very few are as foundational to it as those of fairy tales. And of all of the more iconic fairy tales that have been endlessly adapted over time, there are very few as iconic as that of Cinderella. Effectively a tale of an heiress to a merchant household who is consigned to being a servant in her own house after her stepmother decides to try to launch her daughters into high society. She eventually comes into direct conflict with her stepmother as she tries to not only spread her own wings and stand up for herself, but also find true love in the form of the local prince who holds a ball to find his own queen. It's a story that's been adapted into ballets, musicals, but most importantly, it's been adapted into movies, animated children's classics, teen romantic comedies, and even an honest-to-goodness historical fiction Renaissance-era film. However, out of all the films to be made on Cinderella, the one that I want to highlight today is one of the last you'd ever expect not only me to discuss, but also to be discussed in the breadth of brilliant, if not stuffed competition for good Cinderella adaptations. The 2015 Walt Disney live-action remake of Cinderella is not the first movie that I would suspect of loving, but after watching it, I found myself utterly enchanted by it. It is what every remake should be, and what the grand majority of live-action Disney remakes aren't. It is not just a tribute to the original story that saved the Walt Disney Company from bankruptcy in 1950, but it's also a legitimately exceptional expansion of it, with necessary expansions to characterization and story that help it not only be a good remake of the original, but a great film in its own right. However, before we get into the pros, let's dive into the minor cons. The most disappointing aspect of the movie is probably the music. There's a handful of really good tracks here and there, especially the ballroom dance scene, but overall, the music itself is just not particularly interesting or memorable, and it lacks the iconic aria-like solo that defines Cinderella so exceptionally in the original 1950 film. There's also the fact of the character assassination of the Archduke, in which he becomes a scheming, conniving politician rather than the put-upon comedy relief. But when it comes to flaws, that's pretty much the sum total of them. When it comes to the pros, there's quite a lot to be said. On the minor end of things, the production value is outright exceptional. Excellent location shoots in the woods and beautifully opulent sets for both the castle as well as very cozy, homey, and colorful house for Cinderella's father's estate. Back this up with some of the best costuming in the last 20 years of Disney films, and you've got an exceptionally beautiful movie. The casting is also great. What the worst I can say about the casting being is they're okay, and other times they're exceptional. With special props to Derek Jacobi for expanding on and creating a far more sympathetic and dynamic version of the Emperor from the first movie, and Lily James herself bringing to life not only a relatable, but also a good-hearted and independent vision of Cinderella. But I think by and large, the best character to benefit not only from casting and acting, but also from the expansions in the script itself, is easily the prince. Kit has way more meat on his character than Henry from the original 1950 film, having an incredibly solid and dynamic relationship with his father, in which his father pushes him to marry for tradition and political authority, a position concurred by the Archduke, who turns into an antagonist in the film as a result, but he ultimately, through seeing his son's happiness and own personal strength, decides to give him his blessing to marry for love instead, something that he plans on doing since meeting Cinderella earlier on in the film, something not present in the original, and it helps establish and build their dynamic. It helps create a more believable reason for the romance itself throughout the film. As such, you have a really well-defined dynamic between both two leads as well as the prince and his father, creating a well-established and developed a co-lead as the title character herself. And that's about it. It's a straightforward, simple movie with as well as really solid workman-style writing for this kind of story. If you're looking for a good fantasy fairy tale and a true love letter to a true classic, then 2015 Cinderella should be right up your alley. Stay golden.